welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be covering questions and answers today and talking about OCD in general. I often come on here and I think, what topic am I going to speak about? And not for very long. I don't really plan the Instagram lives for long before them, but in sort of the first 5 minutes, just thinking what I'm going to talk about, and I think I'm going to go and cover this topic, and then it changes so much because there's so much to talk about with OCD, and so many of the themes and thoughts all overlap and sort of interlink between each other, so it's very easy to go off on a tangent. So I thought I'd come on here today and cover question and answers. So if you want to ask any specific questions in relation to OCD, just put it in the comments below and I will cover those now. And I will start by talking about OCD being the doubting disorder. Now, because it's a doubting disorder, you are going to doubt anything, absolutely anything, because that's the nature of this disorder. It makes you doubt. It makes you doubt. It makes you doubt everything. Okay, that's what it does. Now, each day that you go about your life, you want to think that today I'm going to get triggered by anything. I am going to doubt anything, right? With OCD, you can become utterly convinced, and that me explaining this to you guys who have OCD, like myself, we're pretty aware that that's the case. You can be convinced of absolutely anything. At my worst, I was convinced that if I walked into a bar and I went to take a drink and I had that drink in my hand, and I just turned my head like that for 1 second and looked down at the drink, I thought someone had put some poison in the drink. I couldn't even understand how I could think such a thing, but it was the nature of this disorder. That's what it does. So OCD is going to lead to you doubting any aspect of your life, everything, and particularly the OCD recovery journey. Am I doing recovery right? Do I understand what I'm doing? What if it doesn't work? What if I stay stuck forever? What if I never get better? All these things. And it will have you absolutely convinced 1 minute to the next. I'm doing it wrong, I'm doing it right, I'm doing it wrong, I've never learned anything, I'm back at square one, I'm never going to improve, my life's always going to be stuck, I don't think I've ever improved anything. That's what this disorder's like. You could take an OCD sufferer, put them in front of me, I could work with getting them better for 6 months, have them absolutely back to sort of feeling complete inner peace, and then in 1 second I could convince them, or somebody else could convince them, that they've never improved at all, they're completely stuck as they always were, and they haven't improved, there's been no improvements. And we can do that to ourselves too. So we can convince ourselves too in a second that we're in that situation. So with the OCD recovery journey, we need to be aware that we can become convinced. That doesn't mean we're stupid. It doesn't mean we can't see things. It doesn't mean that we are sort of easily fooled. It's not that. We are still completely intact in all other areas, but we can doubt something. So it's a protective thing. It's pushing something away. It's an anxiety. It's a getting away. It's a doubting rather than a danger. It's not a vulnerability. It's the opposite. It's the fear to oh my God, that's scary. Okay. So what used to happen in my own journey is I would be going along and I would think, how am I doing? And I'd be feeling better. Like I posted earlier today, that Bitcoin chart, and I was saying I've never seen a chart demonstrate the OCD recovery journey as well as this Bitcoin video chart. And I never thought I'd be using Bitcoin to describe the OCD recovery journey, but it was a video that I tweeted earlier today from about 6 months ago, showing how Bitcoin had gone up and down, up and down, up and down with big fluctuations. And when you actually zoom out and look at it over a long period of time, it was going up and up and up and up, and has been one of the best performing assets of all time. But the thing is with it is if you were zoomed in on it, you could only see the up, the down. Now, with the OCD recovery journey, it's very much like that. when you're zoomed in on it, you feel yourself up, down, up, down. Am I doing well? No, I'm doing badly. Am I doing great? No, I'm doing terrible. And that is why we stay often fearful of being stuck, scared forever, because of this reason, because we zoom in too close to that. So what I was talking about with the doubting disorder is I would go from one moment thinking, okay, I've got this acceptance thing all going well, I'm doing really well now, to I haven't got this acceptance thing going well at all, I'm back at square one, none of it's worked, and it's completely useless, like that, right? So we need to be aware of that we can become that convinced and dart between approaches. Because one minute I'd be like, oh, mindfulness is working so well, that's all I need, done. Why did I even waste my time with all that other stuff? Then I would go into doing exposures. Oh, this is working so well, I need to do more of these. Why did I even bother with all that other stuff? So I was darting between approaches. Now, back in the day when I was trying to recover, it was 16 years ago, there was loads of websites, and I've often talked about this, and ebooks that were trying to sell you something all the time and would say things like, keep yourself constantly distracted and you can recover from OCD. So I thought, oh, I'll give that a try. And then I thought, oh, wow, you know, that's working a lot of the time. Now, obviously I was skeptical, and, you know, I was skeptical, but I was feeling results. Oh, I'm distracted a lot of the time. I'm feeling a lot better, but it was still very up and down. And then I realized you can't achieve long-term recovery through constant distraction. It doesn't work. Aaron Beck was talking about that, who's the founder of CBT along with Albert Ellis, and he spoke about how long-term distraction is not a solution, but in the short term, it has its benefits. If we keep distracted and we keep ourselves busy, the mind is not focused on the problem and the anxiety cycle, and you get those moments of relief, and it helps with structure for life, for anxiety recovery, OCD recovery. Now, what happens with this is, with the doubting, we can doubt everything we're doing along the recovery journey, and we dart from one thing to the next. And that means that also when we find some relief, we think, that's working now. And then when we slip back to square one, not square one because square one doesn't exist, because we're transitioning through time all the time and learning new stuff all the time, so square one never exists anymore. But we keep thinking, because I'm feeling anxiety and chronic guilt again, I am back at square one. That's what we start convincing ourselves of. Now, as it's a doubting disorder, people can make you doubt anything. So I did a post today talking about saying that yoga and meditation, people who say, just do some yoga and meditation, get rid of anxiety. Sometimes people could be saying that in sort of a bit of a rude, snarky sort of way, but usually it's because people don't understand OCD and anxiety. So they would suggest have a massage, have a hot bath. That's mentioned on most OCD and anxiety helplines. I mean, still, that blows my mind how that's the sort of main bit of information that's often given out, and hopefully we'll move away from that more. But that is what usually when people don't understand OCD, that's what they say, and they don't mean it in a bad way. They are just, it's like, how much do we know about a particular disease of the liver? Well, we don't, so we wouldn't understand it. And that's what's happening there. So it's having compassion for those people when they're saying those things to you, and they're just doing the best. Usually it's from parents, families, loved ones. They're just doing the best with it's. When you don't have it, it's very hard to understand OCD. And so what we need to look at is that people won't understand things, and they will say these kinds of things, okay? And this can also trigger us. Oh my God, am I not getting better? Oh my God, am I still stuck? Oh my God, am I doing this wrong? And we can trigger ourselves with that. The OCD community can trigger us, friends in the OCD community. Oh my God, how are you doing? Oh, you're still stuck on that. And so that's why it's good with learning to build a robust framework overall, learning to move towards unconditional self-life, other acceptance, learning to get a better understanding of OCD, learning to distance ourselves, key point, distance ourselves with the thoughts and the sensations, so that we're learning to become an observer of our thoughts, not in that internal fight and struggle to get rid. So there's all these elements. Now, along the journey, your friends and so on are going to be doing different things. Like one person may have gone and done a retreat in Thailand and done loads of meditation, loads of exercise, and maybe they had mild OCD and they feel great. And we can quickly then, oh my God, I'm so much worse. No, that's worked for them so far. They're doing well, or they're going through a period, they're doing well. And the same in the OCD community amongst people similar to you doing the same sort of journey, which is, okay, they're improving, they're doing well, that's good for them. And you're going through a difficult part and vice versa. And we do a lot of comparison. Am I as bad as them? Am I better than them? All these different things going on. Now, what you want to look at is you want to look at overall, like everything that we do here is about giving people a knowledge of learning to see the world more rationally, learning to see life as it is in reality without the irrational beliefs, as well as learning to distance ourselves from the anxiety thoughts and the OCD, as well as all the other points that I said, learning to have more of an understanding of OCD and so on. So it's general. It's information without some secret method. And back in the day when I used to when I was trying to get better from OCD, there were all these secret methods, and used to see all kinds of crazy things like I said, these e-books to instantly break free from OCD, and lots of ridiculous courses. Some of them that I went on, which were things like be free from OCD in 3 days, break free from OCD in 1 week, guaranteed, all this kind of stuff. And then each of them would be pitted off against each other, saying things like, "Oh no, that won't work. This isn't understood," and "Oh, you've got to do this," and sort of playing on the doubting disorder. You still see a lot of that today. It's a ridiculous thing where people play on that to sort of market things. You see that sometimes, like, "Oh yeah, if you're thinking this, you've got to do this special thing, and my secret method does this." If it's a secret method, or it's a secret thing, or they're just sort of pestering you in DMs or emails trying to get you into something, it's usually because the person has got an agenda of something that they're trying to achieve. And so that's usually what's happening. And it's often disguised very well. And I used to see a lot of that back in the day. Not so much as much, it still happens today, but not as much as then. Because it's the doubting disorder, you do see that, people playing on that. And that can happen in the families too. If someone knows you've got a doubting disorder, they know they can make you doubt, especially in a relationship. In a relationship, the other partner, if they want to sort of have a bit of power over the other partner, they can make that person doubt. So they can play with that a bit. So you want to be a bit aware of those things. Now, with doubting and with OCD, it's a case of learning to see how your brain goes into that cycle, because your brain can just go into that in terms of, for example, if I'm eating these M&Ms and I had a fear in the past when I used to suffer from OCD relating to food, it would literally be like this. I'd get this M&M, I'd eat it, and then it would go, what if you've suddenly developed a nut allergy this second? Or what if you've been working out just before, or you've been a bit anxious, and now you have a really strong reaction to eating that nut, your throat swells up and you die. I'd be convinced my whole throat was swelling up. I used to call out ambulances. I used to go to hospital, and I used to be utterly convinced of this. Now, as I was saying about the doubting disorder and becoming so convinced, we're also very good at convincing others about our problems. So I'd go to the doctor. I remember getting an ambulance out one time. It was at 4 a.m. I called an ambulance. I don't like to do that. I didn't like to do that usually because harm OCD used to get into that as well, and used to always think like someone else could be dying if you take this ambulance out, so I only take it out for a very, very serious thing. So I didn't do the ambulance so regularly, but I went to A&E loads and doctors loads. I mean, that was a lot of health OCD there. And one time I got an ambulance, came out, and I remember sitting there, and I went downstairs in my building, and there was a reception, and at the door, but where there was the guy on reception there, he was sort of looking at me, because I obviously my appearance was, no one would have ever told I had anxiety. And I thought, I'm going to have to let my guard down a bit here. He's going to see this, but he's going to think I'm ill anyway, so I won't really lose face. I was scared of what other people thought of me at that time. An ambulance came, and I remember I was saying, like, my whole throat's swelling up, and they completely believed it. Even though they couldn't see it, they started to believe it all because of how I was saying it, and because we described it in such a descriptive way. It's the same as OCD sufferers are going to the doctor and to the GP. Often the way they explain their illnesses with all the sort of Latin names for a particular thing they're suffering from, the doctor becomes completely convinced that that is the thing they're suffering from, that is the problem, and like really gets into that. And that's what happened there. I was so convincing. I went to the hospital. They gave me loads of drugs to calm, like to calm my, not to calm my body, but like to help with the allergy. Lots of steroids and stuff. And I wasn't having anything. It was like just eating that nut and just having that sensation, having that sensation, allergy. And God, that would be funny, wouldn't it? If from OCD, if I actually did develop an allergy now on Instagram Live and died. Oh, and actually, that's another one with magical thinking. I wouldn't have liked to have done this in the past, and a lot of people wouldn't like to do this. I hope I die now from a nut allergy on this Instagram Live and suffocate to death on the floor alone in this apartment. I wouldn't have liked to have done those ones, because I used to think, God, that means it's definitely going to come true, especially ones relating to family, like to say out loud or something bad happening to my family or something like that. I wouldn't have liked to have done that. Now imagine if I actually did die now after that thing, how many OCD sufferers would be completely convinced in magical thinking, and that would be a story that people would remember. So let's hope it doesn't happen. So yeah, that's basically where a lot of those ones came from. And they came from nut allergies, shellfish. What other ones? Nut allergies, shellfish. Yeah, specifically nut allergies, shellfish, oysters. I used to eat oysters before, and I never had a problem with them. Then I read a book about somebody getting oyster poisoning, and it's a neurological thing, and then nearly dying and giving it up. So I was like, right, never eating oysters again. Mussels was the same, and I avoided, like, even if someone made pasta and it had mussels in it, and then they would sort of say, okay, you can have the side without the mussels. I'd be like, the mussels touched it, so I can still die from it. And it was getting like that, and it was getting completely out of hand. And I actually, around about 24, 25, terrible story actually, my sister's friend, my sister's younger than me. She was young, so she was 25, so she must have been about 19. And she had a nut allergy, very bad. She had to take medication all her life. And she went to the gym, and she ate a nut bar from the gym, from the machine, a nut protein bar with nuts in it, after she had a workout, and she did die. I mean, it was a rare case of like 1 in 3 million or something. And she was in the paper, and because it was a horrible story. And my sister went to her funeral at the time. And I remember thinking at that time, like, when those things happen, those actual fears happen, you always, well, not always, but different people's different. So I'll talk about my own experience with it, so it should show how it went through my head. But I literally thought at the time, like, oh my God, that's just OCD. Like, imagine if that happened about me. So like all the nut things, all the hospitals, everything, I was like, oh, I can just see that's just OCD. Like, how am I being so stupid about that? She's actually died. And it's like, in those instances, you can sometimes see it, but other times I couldn't. Other time, and that didn't release it. I still had to get used to eating all the food again with exposures, taking the risking it all until I no longer cared. And now I'll eat anything, it doesn't matter. But then the situation was one of my fears, which was real event OCD, latched to sort of childhood around the ages of sort of 13 to 20. What happened with that one is it latched and then it stayed locked on for years, which felt like 24/7 with sort of chronic guilt and chronic anxiety pumping away. And when I was in that cycle for so long, I was so absolutely convinced that this wasn't OCD, because the thing when you've got OCD, and again, I don't have to explain it to you because you guys do have OCD, you can't see how people without OCD could think. Like, because you can't see the disorder. You think, well, I'm thinking reasonably normally, like I've always thought in my life. So how can this be OCD? Because this seems genuinely like what people would worry about. You know, seems very normal to worry about this thing. But then, and it would feel distant to the other OCD, like this one was different. It's like all the other ones were OCD, but this one isn't. So this one's real, this one's different. It kind of puts itself separate to that. You know, if you could just tell yourself, oh, it's OCD, which we often think initially, that's how we'll get out of it, then it's really easy. But it isn't, because it knows that that's the sort of way out. So it kind of puts a veil over that mental sort of veil in your head, so it's kind of blocked off, so you can't really see that. I mean, obviously, look, since I've been doing this, working with OCD for over 10 years, I'm very, very much aware how convincing OCD is. When people come to me and say they've handed themselves into police stations 7 times in the last 6 months because of fear they're going to harm somebody, or I see people come in and speak to me and they wear handcuffs a lot of the time because they're scared that they're going to harm somebody, or a mother who's not got any knives in the whole house and they're all locked away in a box in the attic because she's scared of harming her children. So look, I'm very aware of how real it feels. However, when you're in it, it feels that real and convincing that you can't think of how it's OCD. And I know many moments like that where, like, for example, a lot of my OCD was always to do with related to harming people, so what if I was a sociopath? What if I was a narcissist? What if I wanted to harm someone like in some ways? And I remember at times being so utterly convinced of that. And like, you know, when I first did exposures around sort of leaving things out, and like the knife situation, just being out, those kind of things, at first, and thinking, God, no, this is really risky. This is like really dangerous. And because it is that utterly convincing. And then when I'd got over all of those ones relating to with sort of an external compulsion, then it was all mental. And then I never thought I would ever get out of that, because I thought, because it's all mental, how am I ever going to break that cycle? You know, it's all in my head, and I can't see a way to bring down that fear. And so it was like that for a long time. And like I was saying, you know, over a period of the last 10 years, and working with OCD sufferers in pretty much every country, and it really is like that now. It does sort of blow my mind these days when people email and call me from countries that I've never heard of, or places like people call me from, say, an army base in the middle of the sea, and say, I've got OCD and I'm stuck on this army base for a year or whatever, and can I have the wife of someone who's in the army, or vice versa. I have people that are in police SWAT teams, people in the military, people in war zones, everything that you can imagine. It really is what people don't realise about this job, especially because with Instagram, you'll see in the posts that I do, and you don't see so much of what I'm working with on a day-to-day basis. But like, it's a very crazy experience, and it's been an incredible journey. Like working with so many different people all over the world, especially in our groups, and all the people mixing and matching and sharing all their stories about OCD. And that was really mind-blowing, just thinking, oh, look, you've got people here from India, Pakistan, Mexico, all parts of South America, China, all mixing together with stories of OCD that had never spoken to anyone about OCD before. And that was really amazing to see it firsthand, and to think that this had all come together. And from the journey where I was in my room at 17 years old thinking nobody understood OCD, to now where so many people, and meeting so many people with OCD and all their journeys and all the lives that I've worked with and through their struggles with OCD. It's been an incredible journey, and it is like that every day. It's like that. I'm very, very grateful for that. You know, when I wake up in the morning and the day starts, and I start with the calls to Australia and so on, and I start those calls, and then later on in the afternoon you've got Hong Kong and America and all the different places in Canada. I work with a lot of people in Canada, and when you see that and you're doing that, and I remember back to the times when I was stuck in the room on my own with OCD, it's a very crazy feeling, because I think of all the generations in the past that didn't have that were stuck and didn't have anyone to ever know that they had OCD. So in the past, you wouldn't have even you might have told your mum, but you'd have been a bit careful. Like, imagine living at a time where they were sort of burning people that they thought were witches at the stake. Well, that wouldn't have been so ideal to tell somebody, hey, you know, I think I've got a thought that I'm possessed by a demon. It's not going to go down so well. So we really don't think about that most of the time. Or going to a mental asylum, and that's where you really would fear, what if I'm crazy in those times? Because that would be bloody scary in those sort of old mental asylums. Wouldn't have been great. And then think of all the meds that you would have taken at those times, and the doctors didn't understand. And look, like I was just saying about the different countries, working with people in some countries where the doctors have got no idea about OCD, and then the people around them have no idea, and it's very difficult, and it is like going back 100 years. So there's so much things like that still going on. But what I was saying was, it has been an incredible journey with this, and I'm always grateful every day with all the people I get to see and work with. And that was when I first built the community sort of aspect of what we do with the WhatsApp groups and so on. That was a really difficult territory to navigate, because at first I was thinking like, do I want to introduce WhatsApp groups? What's sort of the pros and cons? And then I was thinking, right, when I was stuck with OCD, like for example with that nut situation, say it's like 1 a.m, you've eaten this nut and you're terrified, you're really having a difficult time. Having other people there that have been through the same thing as support is incredible, and that makes such a difference. So I was like, well, I really want that for that reason. Then I was thinking, like, when you think you're the only person in the world with it, it's so isolating and lonely. Like, even when you're going into therapy and so on, you feel a bit like a test subject, because you feel like, well, they're all right, but I'm not. And so you kind of still feel isolated. So I thought, we've got to have this community aspect. And then I thought, well, how do you want to do this? Do you want it to be like kind of stale, where it's like people interacting just about OCD? So like, hi, I've got harm OCD. Oh, you have harm OCD. Have you read this book? Have you done this? Have you got this thought? Have you got that? And I thought, that's going to be really kind of like just very bland, and people aren't going to be very excited by that. It's not going to feel very empowering. I thought it's got to be like how we talk to our friends in the WhatsApp groups, but not as crazy as we talk to our friends, but still within that kind of spectrum. And it's very difficult with that, because you can't exactly say to people like, oh yeah, don't make that joke, don't make this and that, because then it ruins it. So it's got to kind of be open and natural like that. And so that's what I thought, right, I've got to do that, I've got to change that. And I thought that's really going to change the dynamic, because people won't have seen something like that, and it will be very different. And I thought, we're going to have to see how that works. And so we started off and building those WhatsApp groups, so that there was, I thought, if I do a WhatsApp group, and it takes a lot of work in thinking, which people don't see on the other side, but I was thinking like, right, if I'm going to do a WhatsApp group, it's got to have moderators in there, like a forum, which are people who have had OCD or have OCD and are further along in their recovery or recovered, and then they can sort of help in there through messaging and checking and support like they do in forums and so on. So I thought that's a good format to run it by. And I thought, shall I have these groups so that it's like one group just ROCD, one group just HOCD? And then I thought, no, because then they cross over so much. The thoughts, like people would start thinking, oh my God, I've got one type of OCD. So it needs to just be random. So it was basically just done as basically random groups that had moderators in, where everyone could talk about OCD, but it had like rules about like no reassurance, no really abusive messages, no politics, all this kind of stuff. So they flowed well. And then it grew and grew and grew until now there's thousands of people in all different WhatsApp groups that we run. And I realized about a year in, I thought, this is a time in history that we're so lucky that we've got technology that allows this to be like that, because before I couldn't have done that. So when I was stuck in my room only, say, 16 years ago, that wasn't available as an option, but now it is. And then you think, well, think about how quickly things are transforming like that. And so you're kind of trying to move along with the way that technology is moving and the way things are moving to try and get the maximum benefit for people with OCD, so that they don't feel alone, so that they can learn the quickest and all those kinds of things. So that's basically where that section of what we do came about. It came about like that. And that's the way I always wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a sort of really fun community, same as the Facebook group and the same as Instagram, social media. I didn't want this sort of stale environment, because that's what drove me mad when I was suffering from OCD. Just was so rigid and just and like there was no sort of jokes and no sort of like normal life. And that's what I thought would had to be like that. I thought you've got to have people that are really talking about their life experiences. And I remember, it's what Albert Ellis said, and I really liked about what he said. He said in sessions, he said he swore, and people used to think, oh, it's terrible that he swore. And he said, why not? He said, you know, humans swear amongst their friends, but then in other environments they don't. Now, I agree and disagree. I don't think it's good to be swearing all the time. Like if I watch some Instagram videos or YouTube videos and someone's trying to explain their point with loads of swearing, I always think it doesn't sound very good. I think like if you're trying to display a point when you can only do it with swearing, it's not very good. But in part of normal human interaction, we swear amongst our friends, and that is all, and that's all fine. That's part of normal life, and so that's how I wanted those WhatsApp groups to be, and that's what I wanted most things to be like, just real interaction about the OCD struggle, and really like that. So that was key. And so then what happened was, if you look at a period of time, so if you think, right, now we're at a period where social media means that we can meet other people with OCD from wherever they are in the world and talk to them, interact with them, and so on. If we then zoom the clock back, so before the internet, that would obviously a lot harder. You could have had the most amazing recovery journey story in Kuala Lumpur and nobody knows about it, right? Unless you wrote a book. Okay, so that's why, there wasn't, nowadays you've got lots of social media accounts, people sharing wisdom about their OCD and so on. Back then, like when Claire Weeks wrote her books on anxiety, they were like a massive game changer because people just thought, oh my God, we haven't seen anything like this at all, because things weren't shared like that. But now it's shared so fast. So that's where the world was changing. So we've got this time now where we can share with each other and we can interact with each other, and that can also be detrimental to recovery in the sense that we can be over reassuring ourselves, doing a lot of compulsions, trying to get too much information, and so that has to be balanced. That's a constant balancing act that we're always doing with the groups that we run, trying to balance that, no reassurance, get the right information, and that's tricky. Only when you're running a thing like that do you realize it's tricky. When you've got thousands and thousands of people in there, when talk about our Facebook group, for example, with 14,000 members, you're having to balance that, and so it's difficult because you've got to spot where is a reassurance, what's not. Are they genuinely asking a question about OCD for general advice, or is it a reassurance question? And the problem is that with OCD, it's often good to get sort of, not reassurance in the sense of reassurance, but like it's good to have a rough idea. So like, for example, if someone said to me, I've just developed this, I've got a fear of this nut situation, eating a nut and getting allergic to it, it's good to give them a bit of understanding at first, saying like, okay, you've got OCD, so you're obviously going to be very scared of this nut. The risk's low, but that's how it works. But after that, there's no point going into any more than that, because that's complete reassurance. So constantly saying, oh, it's very unlikely, oh, it's never going to happen, I've never met anyone with it, it doesn't do anything. And that is still done so much. You hear the most common line, which is, you're the last person to ever do that. And if you say that to somebody, you're the last person to ever do that, over and over again, that becomes reassurance. At the beginning, it's good to understand, oh, actually, this is how OCD works. I'm not actually going to do this, but it feels like I'm going to do this. But constantly telling them you're the last person, instead of moving towards unconditional self-acceptance, that's where people get stuck. And that's so key, because only when I started to move towards, hey, wait, even if I did do something that I'm scared of, that still wouldn't detract from my value as a human, being alive and human, fulfilling my function as a human. And there's no such thing as a so-called bad person, and all the teachings from the book, The Myth of Self-Esteem by Albert Ellis. Then I started to see, I can move towards that fear in my mind, instead of putting up internal resistance and trying to avoid, and all of that stuff came together. And that was so key, because for so long I'd been doing this sort of internal narrative of, you're the last person, that's so rare, oh, you're okay, oh, this is never going to happen, over and over and over and over, which was keeping me stuck, because I was running from it. It's like an internal avoidance, it's an internal running away from the thing you fear. So yeah, that's what I wanted to come on here today to talk about. And I mean, look, I could talk about this subject for many videos, and that's why I come on here and keep doing the Instagram lives. But I wanted to do this in sections to give you a bit of an idea about my own journey, a bit of an idea about what we do and how it works, and thinking of mine of how it goes into what we're doing and why we do these things. And we're going to be doing a lot more videos like that. So because I think that's key. From an explanation point of view, not from a reassurance point of view. Question answers, I was going to do at the beginning of this video, I was saying I was going to do question and answers, but I will save it for the next video because I think it needs a video, just an Instagram live covering all the questions and answers like we regularly do. And I haven't done one for a while, so that I can cover all of those in one specific video. So I'll be doing that next. Guys, great to see you all on this Instagram live today, and I will see you on the next one. Take it easy, guys. See you later.